Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1978. We're going to be taking a look at Elvis Costello and the attractions, and they're going to be playing through I Don't Want to Go to Chelsea. So let's get Elvis and the guys up on screen and see how they get on.
Photographs and fancy tricks to get your kicks at 6 to 6. It thinks of all the lips that it licks and all the girls that it's going to fix. She gave a little flirt, gave herself a little cuddle with there's no place yet but I'm gonna skirt a waddle. Gab a duck and a smith, she was last, she was a model. They call her a dasher when she looks like Elsa. I don't want to go to Chelsea. Oh no, does not move me, even though I see the movie. I don't want to check your pulse. I don't want nobody else. I don't want to go to Chelsea. Everybody's got new artists. Being nice gonna kiss the waters. And now the teacher is away. All the kids begin to play. Dressed in white coat, shake her very gently by the throat. One snip Gus, one snip Alfie. I don't want to go to Chelsea. Oh no, that's not move me. Even though I see the movie, I don't want to check your pulse. I don't want nobody else. I don't want to go to Chelsea.
I'm just going to jump in here. When we get into this breakdown, the change in dynamics, it always happens with great bands. And what a great band we have here. The Attractions are one of those bands that are spot on live. The thing about this setup is the bass line running through the whole track you might think is being played on the bass, but it's being played by Steve Naive on keys here. So it means that everything you're hearing on the keys is being played at the same time as that bass riff. And if you watch his left hand, that's supplying this bass line the whole way through. And just to listen to it, we've got Bruce Thomas on bass as well, and he's going to be backing that up and maybe simplifying some of those lines because it's going to be able to cut through on the keys a lot more. But having those two things going on at the same time on keys is so impressive, and we've got top quality musicianship across the board here. Because we've got the rhythm section. I always say that it's the most important thing. You've got to have that in place to get a great live performance, and we have that here. We've also got Pete Thomas on drums here, and he starts with a rock solid drum fill, but then is spot on tempo-wise throughout the whole performance. And he's also got that versatility in his playing. He's got such a great groove going on, and that lays the foundation for the rest of the performance and the rest of the instruments. But the way that he changes from the hi-hat to the ride cymbal is such an interesting change and makes just the percussion so interesting in itself. When we're listening to the verse, because of that change to the ride cymbal, it means it's making it interesting from the ground up, and then everything else is placed on top of that. So having top quality players like this means that you're always going to get a great live performance. And then we've got Elvis Costello at the front of the stage, whose vocal delivery and playing in itself is unique. And the look as well, very Buddy Holly-esque in the suit and glasses. But the way that Elvis delivers his vocal is standalone in that it's a freeform vocal. The way that he tells a story is like he's talking, but don't let it fly under the radar, the accuracy of Elvis's pitch, because he definitely has that appreciation of melody running through his main vocal lines. And we've got that here. You might not notice it as much with certain compositions because he repeats the same notes a lot of the time and he'll just sing on that pitch. But this is a great video to showcase the melody and the accuracy of pitch that Elvis actually goes through. That vocal delivery that Elvis has is unique because of the way that it's short, it's sharp. He sometimes does stay very true to a particular pitch and melody, but then sometimes he'll throw caution to the wind. Another thing is the accent, and Elvis had an accent that he would put into that vocal, and it was just interwoven naturally into it. It wasn't something that sounded put on, you just accepted it as it was. And when you listen to it, it's hard to place where that accent is. It sounds American, but in terms of where it would come from in America, it's, for me, somebody in the UK like Elvis, it would be hard to place, but it's just the Elvis Costello voice. So when you add all of these things together, it's going to give you a unique product at the end, because the accent that Elvis sings with, it doesn't sound contrived, it's consistent, and the delivery is unique in itself, like I mentioned. And listen to the way that Elvis talks and his natural accent, and compare that to his singing voice. Totally different light and shade between the two. He's also got that weapon in his arsenal that every musician, every artist wants, which is being able to write a hit, and many hits. And I've always said on this channel that writing songs is a totally different skill to playing an instrument to a high standard or being a great vocalist. You've got to have such a deep appreciation of music and melody, and Elvis certainly has that. And we know from the things that he's done in terms of composing, but also arrangements and orchestral arrangements, some of the things that he's done in his career in terms of writing shows what a deep appreciation that he's got of melody across the board. But we're going to get back into this performance and we can start to appreciate the dynamics that's going to be within this track and Elvis's appreciation of those dynamics that he writes into his compositions. But let's get back into it.
Photographs of fancy tricks to get your kicks at 6 to 6. He thinks of all the lips that he licks and all the girls that isn't going to fix. She gave a little flirt, gave herself a little cuddle, but there's no place yet. But I'm gonna skirt a waddle, got it up, finish ring. She was last, she was Bible. They call her the dashing when she looks like Elsa. I don't want to go to Chelsea. Oh no, that's not moving. Even though I've seen the movie, I don't want to check your pulse. I don't want nobody else. I don't want to go to Chelsea.
And there we have it. Elvis is a classic example of an artist who didn't change the way he looked or the way he sounded to try and be more popular. He just did things his own way and wrote his own way. So it meant that by default he was unique, because there isn't another Elvis Costello out there. And it's a great lesson to learn as an artist. So Elvis had so many strings to his bow in terms of sounding unique vocally, but also with the compositions that he was writing, his ability with lyrics and making a song like poetry, using words. He had an ability to put words together that was unlike anybody else, but also his guitar playing. He had a certain expression on his guitar playing, especially with lead, like we saw in this video. Lots of downstrokes with the pick, lots of straight melody, and this is the thing, he's not playing super fast here. He's not really pushing the technical ability on the fretboard, but he's making the guitar solo stand out, and it's got its own expression, which is the most important thing to do with a guitar solo. Elvis is one of those artists that it's going to be impossible for me to cover everything he's achieved, everything that he's done in this video, but I do like to give you some background information, especially if it's the first video on the artist on this channel. And I want to kick it off by saying that Elvis first sang backing vocals on an advert that was on TV, and it was for R. White's Lemonade, and there's a little jingle on that advert that sounds a lot like Elvis Costello singing, because it's his dad. And that advert did win an award for adverts. I didn't know that there were awards for jingles on adverts, but there are. So Elvis in his late teens had a few jobs with computers, data entry, that kind of stuff. And then when he was 20 years of age, this is when that advert would have come out. And it was when he was 22, so 1976, that he got spotted by Stiff Records, which was an independent label. And they signed him off the back of his demo tape that they heard. And his manager at Stiff Records told him to change his name from D.P. Costello to Elvis Costello. So his first album, My Aim Is True, did pretty well. It got to number 14 in the UK charts, but unfortunately none of the singles charted. And the other problem was it was only distributed in the UK, whereas Elvis wanted it to be distributed in the USA. He was a bit frustrated at this, so he took his guitar with him down to a meeting at CBS Records where the executives were meeting, and he busked outside just to try and draw their attention to him, and just to state the fact that none of his records were being put over to the USA when he thought they should. Anyway, he got arrested, but a few months later he signed to Columbia Records, which was known as CBS over in the USA at the time. In 1977, Watching the Detectives was released, and that's the same year that he got the band together with the Attractions. He also performed on Saturday Night Live, and the Sex Pistols were due to play, but then they pulled out, so then Elvis stepped in, and halfway through his performance he stopped and started Radio instead of the track that he was supposed to be playing, and he wasn't supposed to do that. So very akin to Jimi Hendrix on the Lulu show. The upturn with this event is that it got him massive publicity, and he experienced a real peak in sales after this performance. In 1978 is when he released This Year's Model, and at this time he was now seen as a performer but also a songwriter, because other artists were covering his songs. Linda Ronstadt and Dave Edmunds both had huge hits with Elvis Costello tracks, and he released Armed Forces in 1979, and that had a massive track that went to number 2 here in the UK called Oliver's Army. So in 1980, Get Happy was released, and in 1981, Trust came out, and in that same year, he released his album called Almost Blue, and this was different because it was country covers that he did on that particular album, and there was a George Jones track on there which was called Good Year for the Roses, and that did really well, got to number 6 in the charts. In 1982, Imperial Bedroom came out, and in 83 was Punch the Clock, and the album in 1984 called Goodbye Cruel World, that was the album where Elvis announced his retirement and the breakup of the band before they released that album. And unfortunately, that album didn't go down particularly well. Elvis has said that the execution of that album couldn't have been worse, and it probably did come from the fact that before you're about to do an album, you don't really want to know that you're going to be breaking up and going in different directions. And that retirement of Elvis's was very short-lived, but probably didn't help the recording process. It wasn't until 1986 that they started to go their own ways, and that was really due to Bruce playing bass and Elvis. I don't think they really saw eye to eye, unfortunately. King of America was released in 1986. Same year, Blood and Chocolate was released. And in 1989 is when Elvis signed with Warner Brothers Records, and the first album that he released then was called Spike, and there was a single from that album called Veronica. This was co-written with Paul McCartney, and that was a massive hit. Throughout the 90s, he released 8 albums in all, and one of those albums was for a TV series called GBH, and that won a BAFTA for the best music for a TV series, and it was mainly orchestral music, so it really did show Elvis's ability for composing and not only writing pop songs and rock songs and so many different songs that have been covered by so many different artists, but just taking it down to orchestral music, he still had the ability to write something that would really create a mood and be placed onto a TV show to really get those scenes to stand out. In 1996, he released the album All This Useless Beauty, and that was the last album he had recorded with The Attractions. That was the last year they toured as well. The next year, in 1997, he released a best-of album to fulfill his contract with Warner Brothers Records. So after this, he signed with Universal in 1998, and this is when he released Painted from Memory, and this was a collaboration with Burt Bacharach, and this is also the same year that he appeared in the Austin Powers movie. It was the second one, and he was actually in the film singing I'll Never Fall in Love Again, the Burt Bacharach track. In 1999, he was back in the movies. This time, he did a song for the film called Notting Hill, and it was his version of a track called She, and that was a great example of how Elvis could take somebody else's song and make it sound like his own composition, because that was such an iconic performance of that particular track, because it suited that film so well. In 2002 is when he released When I Was Cruel, and again, that was a massive success as an album. In 2003, he and The Attractions were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then in 2003 is when he released his album North, again a massively successful album. At this time, he was also doing stuff on TV. He did fill in for a short time for David Letterman on his show over in the USA. In 2004, he released The Delivery Man, and that was recorded with The Imposters, who were The Attractions, but now without Bruce on bass, so they changed the name to The Imposters. That went really well, that album, and it was well received. In 2005, he performed at Glastonbury Festival. He said that over in the USA, they had more of an appreciation of older artists, and that's something that I would tend to agree with, that maybe in the UK, a lot of people have the music that they're into, and that is it, and they don't really want to listen to anything else. Whereas on this channel, I'm certainly an advocate of listening to any music that you can get a hold of, and listen to the different elements that you can add to your own music as an artist. And Elvis, I think, just liked the fact that over in the USA, the younger generation were more likely to check out players like Willie Nelson, as Elvis did state. In 2008, he released Momofuku, and he also toured with the Police at that time. And in 2009, that's when he made a surprise appearance at a Spinal Tap gig, and he performed Gimme Some Money with the guys. In 2011 is when he released National Ransom, and in 2018 came Look Now, and that was recorded with The Imposters, and there were 3 tracks on that that were co-written with Burt Bacharach. And in 2019, 2019, he was awarded an OBE here in the UK. In 2018, he did cancel some tour dates from that Look Now album because he was diagnosed with cancer and was having surgery in order to remove that. And he said to his fans that he thought he'd be able to continue on touring, but his doctor said that he should not and take some time to rest and recover, which is certainly good advice. But it just goes to show that Elvis is one of those guys that is just wanting to play all the time. He's a prolific songwriter, as we can see with the history of his albums. But also, another thing I want to draw your attention to is his drive that he had early on in his career, where he was doing quite well in the UK, but he wanted to crack that USA market. So he had that old-fashioned drive and work ethic to make something of himself. And it's something that I mention in other videos. It's not just enough to be a great songwriter, to be unique, and to be a talented musician, a composer, arranger. You've got to have the drive to put yourself out in front of the people that need to see you, and you've got to dedicate your life to that, and that's certainly what Elvis has done. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one.